In the rolling green hills of central Virginia, during the spring of 1834, an event occurred that would alter forever our comprehension of the deepest abysses of human wickedness. 47 children, their ages spanning from 6 to 16 years, were discovered shackled with iron in a hidden cellar beneath a farmhouse that, from the outside, looked perfectly ordinary. These children shared no family resemblance, spoke a babble of different tongues, and when the rescuers finally reached them, the only name they could sob through cracked lips was one, Mother Sullivan. The official report of the local sheriff, locked away and forgotten for more than 100 years in the dusty Henry County archives, painted pictures so nightmarish that 3 of the deputies who first descended those stairs handed in their badges within days. Yet what lingers longest in the mind is not merely the raw horror of what was uncovered, but the colder, sharper terror of knowing that Constance Sullivan had run her ghastly trade for more than 20 years without anyone in the surrounding countryside ever truly seeing her. They called her Mother, those broken children. And the truth behind that word turned out to be infinitely darker than any neighbor could have dreamed. Before I take you deeper into the story of the Sullivan household and the secrets that finally spilled out like blood from a fresh wound, I need to say this channel is not for the faint of heart. It is built for those rare souls brave enough to stare straight into the worst moments of our nation's past. If you are still here, reading these words, then you already know some truths are too monstrous to look away from, no matter how badly they burn. So do this now, smash that subscribe button, become part of the small circle who refuse to let these stories die, and drop a comment telling me what state you're watching from tonight. Are you bold enough to keep listening when the darkness comes from your own backyard? The question that gnawed at every investigator in 1834, and still baffles historians today, is simple and terrible. How did something this enormous stay hidden for so long in a tight-knit farming community where everyone claimed to know everyone else's business? Virginia in 1834 existed in an uneasy in-between time. The great plantations of the old order still ruled the landscape, yet from the industrial north came the first faint rumors of a different future. In that shifting world, the little settlement of Millbrook, maybe 50 families scattered across the soft hills of Henry County, looked like any other slice of rural America. People grew tobacco and corn, bartered at Henderson's store, and met in the single-room schoolhouse that served as church, courthouse, and dance hall all in one. On the edge of that community sat the Sullivan place, 2 stories of plain wooden farmhouse, white clapboard, wide porch, red barn 60 yards back, smokehouse, chicken coop, everything exactly where you would expect to find it. Travelers on the dusty Richmond Road saw nothing unusual. The house had been built in the federal style that was fashionable 15 years earlier, neat and respectable. From the road you could not see what made the property different. What made it different was underground. Ezra Sullivan had bought the land in 1809 with money he inherited when his father's tobacco fortune finally came in. Over the next 2 decades he hired crew after crew of local workers to improve the house. Most farms had a simple root cellar. The Sullivans ended up with something that stretched far beyond the foundation walls, a maze of stone rooms built section by section so that no single workman ever saw the whole design. Ezra paid in cash and asked only that each man keep to his own piece of the job. His wife Constance arrived in Millbrook in 1811, a bride of 22. People remembered her as striking, dark hair, unusually gentle voice, always dressed plainly but spotlessly. She attended Methodist services when her health allowed and had a reputation for quiet charity. Whenever anyone asked about contributing to the church or the poor, Constance would smile sadly and explain that she and Ezra were already caring for several orphan nieces and nephews sent down from her family in Pennsylvania. It was only temporary, she always said, until proper homes could be arranged. That explanation satisfied everything. When Mrs. Henderson at the store occasionally glimpsed a pale child's face in the back of the Sullivan wagon, Constance would lay a finger to her lips and whisper that the poor lambs were still too traumatized by losing their parents to speak to strangers. In an age when fever and accident took children the way winter took cattle, no one pressed further. Every fortnight Constance came to town with a long list and enough hard money to buy flour, cornmeal, salt pork, molasses, and medicines in quantities that seemed large for 2 adults. Thomas Henderson once remarked on it. Constance reminded him about the orphans, smiled, and paid without argument. The children needed building up, she said. They arrived half-starved and sick. On the farm itself, the daily rhythm puzzled neighbors. Most families were in the fields from dawn to dusk. The Sullivans often worked long after dark. Lanterns glowed in the windows at strange hours, sometimes the sound of hammering drifted across the fields in the middle of the night. Ezra explained that he was adding rooms for the growing number of children in their care. People nodded. Charity took effort. Dr. Marcus Whitfield, the traveling physician who covered the area, was called to the farm several times over the years. Each time Constance met him at the door, described symptoms in precise detail, and asked for specific remedies. She never allowed him to examine the patients himself. The children were terrified of strangers, she said, especially men. Their nerves were shattered. The doctor accepted it. He had seen grief before. Even Reverend Samuel Matthews believed the Sullivans were doing the Lord's work. On his rare visits he praised their Christian kindness and offered to help place the orphans. Constance always thanked him with tears in her eyes and promised she was corresponding with relatives up north. It just took time, she said. Patience and prayer. No one understood that for more than 20 years Constance Sullivan had been perfecting the perfect lie. The children were not waiting for loving homes. They were merchandise, stolen, bought, or lured from families across half a dozen states, and kept in a stone hell no living soul was ever meant to find. The first thread that began to unravel everything came with the cruel winter of 1834. February was brutal. Snow piled high, temperatures stayed below freezing for weeks. On the 23rd, a merchant named Jacob Stern, traveling from Richmond to Charlottesville, was caught in a blizzard and begged shelter at the nearest house, the Sullivan farm. Ezra let him in with obvious reluctance. The evening was tense. Supper was cornbread and salt pork served in near silence. When Stern asked about the famous orphans, Constance said they were all asleep with fever and must not be wakened. That night, lying on a pallet in the parlor, Stern heard muffled crying from directly beneath the floorboards. In the morning he mentioned it. Ezra laughed it off as wind in the foundation, common in old houses. Stern left uneasy, but the roads were still bad and he had miles to go. 3 weeks later, on March 15th, a 15-year-old Irish girl named Mary Catherine Flynn got separated from her family while crossing a swollen river. Half frozen and lost, she stumbled to the Sullivan farm as night fell. Constance took her in with smiles and warm milk. Mary Catherine was never seen alive again. Then, on April 2nd, a local farmer named William Hutchinson was hunting rabbits in the woods bordering the Sullivan land when he heard screams, raw, animal shrieks of terror that seemed to rise from the ground itself. He crept closer, hid behind oaks 50 yards from the house, and watched for nearly an hour. The screams came in waves, always from below. At one point Ezra Sullivan emerged from a low cellar door on the side of the house, glanced around nervously, and vanished back underground. Hutchinson told his neighbors. Some thought the orphans must be disturbed children needing harsh discipline. Others began remembering things, the huge food orders, the lights burning all night, the fact that no one in town had ever actually laid eyes on more than 1 or 2 of these mysterious orphans. Sheriff Benjamin Crawford, 15 years on the job, thought it was gossip. But when Hutchinson marched into his office and demanded a formal complaint, the law said Crawford had to look. On the morning of April 8, 1834, just after sunrise, Crawford and Deputy Marcus Webb rode out to the farm. Constance greeted them warmly, offered coffee, showed letters supposedly from Pennsylvania relatives. Everything seemed in order, until Deputy Webb asked to use the privy. Walking around the house, Webb saw the side cellar door. 3 heavy padlocks. Chains wrapped twice around the handles. Deep claw marks scratched into the inside of the wood, as if small fingers had tried desperately to dig their way out. When Webb whispered what he had found, both lawmen knew this was no longer about gossip. Crawford politely asked to see the cellar, just to clear things up. Constance's face drained of color. Her hands shook. She began babbling that the cellar was dangerous, that the children were not allowed down there, that it held only old tools. Then, from directly beneath their boots, came the thin, unmistakable sound of children crying and a frail voice calling, "Help us, please." They broke the door down themselves. The stench at first, human waste, terror sweat, and something older and sicker that Crawford later said smelled like hope dying. Lanterns revealed a stone corridor stretching farther than the house above. Iron rings bolted into the walls. 47 children chained by the ankles, just enough slack to reach a bucket and a scrap of blanket. Ages 6 to 16. Skeletal. Ragged. Silent now, staring with eyes that had forgotten what rescue looked like. Deputy Webb, father of 4, ran outside and vomited until he dry-heaved. Sheriff Crawford, who had seen lynchings and battlefields, stood frozen. The scale, the planning, the cold efficiency of it all, it was beyond anything the world had prepared him for. Inside chambers they found punishment stocks, a crude infirmary where children were kept alive just enough to remain useful, and most damning of all, ledgers. Names. Dates of arrival. Origins. Prices paid. Notes on temperament and training. Since 1812, more than 90 children had entered the basement. 47 were still breathing. The rest. A narrow passage, barely big enough to crawl through, led to another room. Shallow graves under the floor, bodies sprinkled with lime. At least 36 small skeletons. The investigation that followed would last months and reach across half the country, because Constance Sullivan had not worked alone. She had built a network. Letters in simple code spoke of merchandise and quality. One from a man named Morrison in Philadelphia, dated only weeks earlier, offered 6 new items of varying ages. Another letter, signed only H. Blackwood of Charleston, complained that the last shipment had been too damaged for his needs and listed exact specifications for the next. The money was staggering, over $8,000 in transactions, the modern equivalent of hundreds of thousands. And the buyers were not just shadowy criminals. They were plantation owners, doctors, even politicians, men who wanted children no one would ever come looking for. The deeper they dug, the more powerful the people they found. Threats began arriving. Witnesses vanished. One child who started talking disappeared from protective custody and was never found. Then Constance Sullivan was found hanged in her cell the night before she was to name every buyer in the chain. Official verdict, suicide. The investigation nearly collapsed. But one girl, 14-year-old Rebecca, kidnapped from Pennsylvania when she was 9, remembered everything. Every conversation overheard through the floorboards. Every visitor. Every name. Her testimony, combined with a guilty ex-overseer from the Blackwood plantation named Samuel Pierce, finally ripped the mask off the entire network. What Pierce revealed in a packed Richmond courtroom made grown men weep and strong men leave the room. On Henry Blackwood's land there had been a second, hidden compound, the experimental quarters. Children bought from Constance Sullivan were not field hands. They were test subjects. Physicians from Charleston Medical College paid to try new drugs, new surgeries without anesthesia, deliberate infection with diseases, all documented in meticulous journals, because to those men the children were not human, only material. Of the 37 Sullivan children sold to Blackwood, only 4 had lived long enough to be passed on. The rest died slowly, scientifically, and were buried in unmarked ground. Raids followed across the South. Over 100 more children pulled from hells just like the first. Prominent men arrested. Others fled to Europe with their fortunes. Justice came in pieces. Ezra Sullivan hanged in 1836, weeping and begging the ghosts of children for forgiveness. Blackwood died in prison, possibly poisoned by friends who feared he would talk. Constance was already dead. Many of the richest buyers walked free, protected by money and politics. The farm itself was torn down in 1845. The basement filled with concrete and sealed forever. But the echoes never really stopped. Rebecca lived to 73, married, raised children of her own, yet never spoke of those years again after the trial. New laws were written, the first real child protection statutes in America. Oversight of orphanages. Federal authority to chase crimes across state lines. The Sullivan case forced a nation to look at what it had allowed to happen to its most defenseless. And still, almost 2 centuries later, when the wind moves through those Virginia hills at night, some say you can almost hear it, faint, lost, coming up from under the ground. Mother. If this story left ice in your veins, then you understand why we can never let these chapters fade. Share it with someone who isn't afraid of the dark. Hit like if you believe evil can wear the kindest face. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because America's past is still bleeding secrets, and we are going to uncover every single one. Tell me in the comments, after everything you just heard, do you think they ever caught them all, or are some of those buyers' descendants still walking free in the same quiet towns? The story didn't end when the concrete was poured and the farmhouse was raised in 1845. Some stories refused to stay buried. For decades afterward, people swore the Millbrook Road was cursed. Wagons broke axles for no reason. Horses refused to pass the sealed-over patch of ground where the Sullivan house had stood. On certain spring nights, when the dogwoods bloomed white like tiny ghosts, travelers claimed to hear children singing a hymn in languages no one in Henry County had ever spoken. Local newspapers tried to move on. They printed cheerful pieces about new railroads and cotton yields, but every few years another letter to the editor appeared. Someone digging a well had turned up small bones wrapped in rotting calico, or a child walking home from school had vanished for an hour and returned mute, eyes wide, whispering about a woman with a soft voice who offered milk and cake. By the 1870s the county had renamed the lane Sullivan Hollow Road, out of grim irony, then quietly changed it again in 1881 after too many people refused to use it at night. In 1893, 60 years after the discovery, a Richmond reporter named Elias Green decided to write the definitive account. He tracked down every living person who had touched the case, the now elderly Sheriff Crawford, the widowed Dr. Whitfield, even Rebecca, who was 59 and living quietly outside Philadelphia under her married name. Rebecca refused to speak, but the others did, on the condition that Green publish nothing until every last one of them was dead. Green honored the promise. His manuscript, titled The Book That Must Not Open Until We Are Gone, was sealed in a Richmond bank vault with instructions that it be opened no earlier than 1940. The vault was cracked open on schedule. What spilled out was a second nightmare. Among the hundreds of pages Green had collected were documents no one in 1834 had ever seen. Item 1, a second set of ledgers, hidden inside the chimney of the demolished house and found years later by a stonemason too frightened to report them. These were not Constance Sullivan's neat records of arrivals and sales. These were written in Ezra's cramped hand and dated from 1809, the very year he bought the land, 5 years before he even married Constance. Ezra had been planning the underground complex long before Constance ever stepped off the stagecoach in Millbrook. Item 2, a letter from Ezra's father, the tobacco baron, dated 1808, expressing disgust that his son had been dismissed from the medical college in Philadelphia under circumstances too vile to repeat. The old man still sent money, but wrote, "Keep your perversions far from Virginia society, or I will see you ruined." Item 3, a charred scrap of paper Green found in Dr. Whitfield's private files, a prescription written in 1829 for tincture of opium, large quantity, to quiet the restless merchandise. The prescription was signed not by Constance, but by a 24-year-old medical student named Ezra Sullivan, using his real name before he ever pretended to be merely a farmer. The revelation rewrote everything. Constance had not been the architect. She had been the perfect apprentice, then the perfect mask. Ezra had studied medicine just long enough to learn how to keep human beings alive under deliberate suffering, then brought that knowledge home to the Virginia hills. He needed a respectable face for the community, someone soft-voiced and pious. Constance, orphaned herself and desperate for security, had stepped into the role with terrifying brilliance. But the deepest cut came from Rebecca. In 1893, the year Green tried to interview her, she finally broke a 50-year silence, but only in a letter she made Green swear to burn after reading. He didn't. He copied it first. Rebecca wrote that in the last month before rescue, Constance had taken her aside and spoken almost tenderly. "You are the strongest of them all, little bird. When this is over, they will ask you what you saw. Tell them whatever keeps you alive. But remember this, the gentlemen who pay for our work are not only in Charleston and Philadelphia. They sit in the State House in Richmond. They preach in the biggest churches. Some of them signed the Declaration itself, or their fathers did. This trade did not begin with Ezra and me, and it will not end with us. It is older than the Republic. We are only the hands that turned the wheel this time." She ended the letter with a line that Green underlined 3 times. "If you ever find the full list of buyers, burn it before you read it. Some names, once known, can still kill." Green claimed the complete list did exist. He said Sheriff Crawford had carried it off the farm in 1834, hidden inside his Bible, and that Crawford took the secret to his grave in 1877. Crawford's granddaughter, however, told a different story in 1939. She said the night her grandfather died, he called her to his bedside, pressed a small oilskin packet into her hand, and whispered, "If the country is ever clean enough to bear the weight, give this to someone who will print it. Until then, keep it from fire and from men." The granddaughter locked the packet in the same bank vault that later held Green's manuscript. When the vault was opened in 1940, the packet was gone. Someone with authority had removed it years earlier. No record of who signed it out. No trace. To this day, no one knows where Crawford's final list is, or if it still exists. What we do know is that between 1941 and 1945, during the chaos of another world war, 3 elderly men in 3 different states, all childless, all rich, all respected, all former planters or their direct descendants, died within 6 weeks of each other. 2 by apparent suicide, 1 in a house fire that burned so hot the safe in his study fused shut and was never opened. Each man left a single line in his will: "For the children under the Sullivan floor, may God have mercy on me." Coincidence, the authorities said. In 1974, when Henry County finally paved Sullivan Hollow Road for the first time, construction crews using ground-penetrating radar found something they were not expecting. The concrete plug poured in 1845 had been removed at some point and replaced with a thinner slab. Beneath it, the main chamber was empty, chains gone, walls scraped clean, but in the farthest corner, behind where the punishment stocks once stood, a small wooden box had been left. Inside were 47 locks of hair, each tied with faded ribbon, each labeled in a woman's perfect copperplate with a child's first name and the year they arrived. The last lock, dated 1833, was bright gold, almost new, as if it had been cut only days earlier. The box is locked in the Virginia State Police Evidence Archives now. Case file still open. Status, unexplained. And every April, on the anniversary of the day Sheriff Crawford broke down the cellar door, anonymous bouquets of white dogwood appear on the side of the road where the house used to be. 47 blossoms. Never 46. Never 48. No card. No fingerprints. No footprints in the soft Virginia clay. Just the flowers, and the soft smell of cake and milk that lingers in the air long after they wilt. Some stories refuse to die because the people who started them never really left. If you're ever driving through central Virginia on a warm spring night and you see a tidy white farmhouse that wasn't on the map yesterday, keep driving. If a woman with dark hair and a gentle voice steps onto the porch and waves you in for coffee, lock your doors and floor it. Because somewhere under those rolling hills, the wheel is still turning. And Mother is always looking for one more child to complete the circle. Tell me, seriously, after everything you just read, would you stop if she waved at you? Put your state in the comments if you're brave enough to find out what's hiding under your own ground. The dogwood bouquets still come every April 8th. 47 blossoms. Always 47. In 1987 the Virginia State Police finally got tired of explaining them to reporters. They set up a hidden camera on a utility pole. The tape ran for 72 hours. Nothing. No vehicle, no person, no wind strong enough to carry flowers. Yet at 4:17 a.m. on April 8 the frame jumps. 1 second the roadside is empty, the next second the bouquet is lying there, dew already beating on the petals like it had been cut hours earlier. The tape was studied by the FBI's technical lab in Quantico. Their conclusion: continuity error of unknown origin. They still use the clip in training classes on unexplained phenomena. That same spring, a graduate student from the University of Virginia named Lauren Mosley decided the Sullivan case would make the perfect dissertation in criminal history. She was 24, fearless, and convinced every legend had a rational core. She spent months in the Henry County Courthouse Annex, pulling every document that hadn't been stolen or lost over the decades. On the night of June 12, 1987, Lauren was alone in the basement records room when the lights flickered. She smelled warm cornbread and molasses. Then the microfilm machine turned itself on. A single reel was already loaded, one that had been missing since 1942. The viewer showed a photograph she had never seen: 47 children standing in 3 neat rows in front of the Sullivan farmhouse, summer 1833. Healthy looking. Clean dresses and shirts. Smiling. Every face perfectly clear. At the edge of the frame, half cut off, Constance Sullivan's gloved hand rested on the shoulder of the tallest girl, Rebecca, unmistakable even at 13. On the back of the photograph, written in fountain pen ink that was still wet to the touch, were the words: "We never left. We only went deeper. Come finish the picture." Lauren took the photograph to the anthropology department for dating. The paper, the emulsion, the ink, everything tested to 1833 to 34. Impossible, except it was real. 3 nights later Lauren disappeared from her off-campus apartment. Her roommate found the front door unlocked, a plate of cornbread cooling on the table, a single dogwood blossom in a glass of milk. Lauren's car was still in the driveway. Her research notes were gone. The only thing left on her desk was the photograph, now showing 48 children. A new girl stood at the end of the back row. She was wearing a UVA hoodie. The case is still open. Every April the dogwood count on Sullivan Hollow Road goes up by 1. As of 2025 it is 59. People stopped counting after that. But the additions never look old. The new children are always wearing whatever teenagers are wearing right now: AirPods, Stanley Cups, Crocs, Hydro Flasks. Their faces are crystal clear on the enlarged crime scene photos the state police keep locked in a vault. Facial recognition software finds no matches in any missing persons database. Because they haven't been reported missing yet. They vanish first. Then they appear in the picture. In 2009, a true crime YouTuber with 1.2 million subscribers decided to spend the night on the concrete plug. He set up 4 4K cameras, motion sensors, and a live stream. At 2:43 a.m. the feed cut to static. When it came back 37 seconds later, he was gone. The cameras kept rolling for 6 more hours. Empty frame. Perfectly focused. You can still find the archived stream if you know where to look. At exactly 4:17 a.m. a bouquet of dogwood fades into existence on the concrete, one blossom at a time, like stop motion. The YouTuber's channel uploaded one final video 3 days later. No title. 10 seconds long. It's just a close-up of his own face, eyes wide, whispering. She only needs 13 more. The video ends with the sound of a woman singing a lullaby in German. The same lullaby several of the 1834 children remembered Constant using to make them sleep. His body was never found. In 2016, the Commonwealth of Virginia tried to sell the Sullivan land for development. A builder broke ground for a subdivision called Dogwood Hollow Estates. 3 days in, every piece of heavy equipment shut down at the same moment. Operators reported the same smell, warm cake and milk, pouring from the air conditioning vents. That night the porta-johns were found neatly arranged in 3 perfect rows. 47 of them. The machines still won't start. The land is overgrown again. Google Maps blurs the parcel. If you drive there today, the street signs say, Sullivan Hollow, in fresh white paint, even though the county swears they were removed in 1998. And sometimes, on quiet nights, if you roll your window down and kill the engine, you can hear it. The soft creak of a rocking chair on a porch that isn't there anymore, and a woman's gentle voice counting, slow and patient, like someone keeping track of something very precious. 50, 51, 52. She's close now. So tell me the truth, wherever you are reading this. What state are you in right now? Because the bouquet on the side of the road this year had 60 blossoms. And one of them was wearing a ribbon the exact shade of the shirt you have on. The count reached 63 in April 2025. That was the first year the dogwoods weren't left on the roadside. They were left on doorsteps. 63 houses scattered across Virginia, North Carolina, and Tennessee woke up on the morning of April 8 to find a small bouquet tied with faded ribbon on their welcome mat. No footprints. No tire tracks. No dew on the grass around them, as if the flowers had been placed there by a hand that didn't disturb the world. Every house had one thing in common: a teenager between 13 and 17 lived inside. 63 teenagers. 63 blossoms. Every ribbon was a different color, but every ribbon was the exact shade of something that teenager had worn in the past week. The police collected the flowers. The parents screamed. The kids said they had dreamed of a woman with dark hair and a soft voice who stood at the foot of their bed and whispered, "Soon." By the end of that week, 11 of the 63 were gone. Not runaways. Gone. Beds slept in. Phones still charging. Windows locked from the inside. One girl in Roanoke left her Spotify playlist running. The last song was a lullaby in German that doesn't exist on any streaming service. The FBI opened a task force. They called it Operation Dogwood. They lasted 9 days. On the 10th day, every agent assigned to the case received a push notification at 4:17 a.m. from an app that wasn't on their phones 5 minutes earlier. The icon was a simple white blossom. When they opened it, there was only one screen, a live counter ticking upward in real time. 63, 64, 65, 66. The app couldn't be deleted. It couldn't be traced. It ran in the background of every device the agents touched, even brand new burner phones straight out of the box. One agent, a 20-year veteran named Sarah Delgado, tried to smash her phone with a hammer. The screen cracked, but the counter kept climbing on the shards. At 4:17 a.m. the next morning, her 16-year-old daughter vanished from a locked bedroom while Sarah sat outside the door with her service weapon on her lap. The counter hit 77 that week. The task force was quietly disbanded. The file was sealed at a classification level that doesn't officially exist. But the app is still out there. If your phone suddenly vibrates at 4:17 a.m. some April morning and you see a white blossom icon you never downloaded, don't open it. Just know the count is at 94 right now. She only needs 6 more to make 100. And when she reaches 100, the old photograph, the one with the children in clean clothes standing in front of the farmhouse, adds another row. They say if you zoom in far enough on the high-resolution scan that leaked onto the dark web last year, you can see her in the very back, standing behind the children. Constance Sullivan. She hasn't aged a day. Her hand rests on the shoulder of the newest child. And she's looking straight into the lens. Straight at you. Waiting. The concrete plug under Sullivan Hollow cracked clean in half last month. Satellite imagery shows it. A perfect straight line, like something underneath pushed upward with exactly the right amount of force. No construction crew will go near it. The county condemned the road. The blurred section on Google Maps is gone now, the parcel just shows black. But if you know the coordinates and you go at night with a strong enough flashlight, you can see down into the fissure. Stone steps. Newly swept. Leading down. At the bottom, very faintly, a woman's voice drifts up, soft, patient, singing that German lullaby. And if you listen very carefully between the notes, you can hear the soft clink of chains being laid out, one by one. 94 links so far. 6 more to go. So tell me, right now, no jokes, no bravado. What state are you in? Because the ribbon on the 95th blossom is already tied. And it's the exact color of the sky outside your window at this very second. Sleep well. If you still can.